Crystal Maggelet was our Distinguished Executive Alumnus of the Year in 2008. And she gave a great talk. Maybe there'll be a few of those themes that'll come out in this talk as well. But at our awards banquet, which we hold every year, the last week in September. And we honored her because of her success in establishing a very successful chain of inns, the Crystal Inn. How many of you have stayed at or seen a Crystal Inn? Knows about Crystal Inn. And Crystal, who attended Utah State University as an undergraduate, then completed her bachelor's degree at Pepperdine, and then went to Harvard and got an MBA, and there met her husband, Chuck Maggelet, who also has a Harvard MBA. Chuck and Crystal had established this company, and it had been very successful, and it was very clear the quality of leadership that Crystal had. She also had a very significant ownership of Flying J, a company that was established by her father, J. Call, hence the J in Flying J. And after his death, she and her brother became the principal owners of this company that was a very fast-growing, privately held company. In fact, the year that we honored Crystal, not for her work at Flying J, but for her work at Crystal Inn, Flying J was the 16th largest company, private company in the United States. So it's a very, very significant company. Refinery, truck stops, and gasoline, and retailing, and stores, and so forth. And a very rapidly growing company. But unbeknownst to us and unbeknownst to Crystal, just 90 days after we honored her as the Distinguished Executive Alumnus of the Year, Flying J, out of the blue, filed for bankruptcy. And they were caught in a perfect storm of collapsing petroleum prices, over-leveraged on their debt, and it was a total shock. Crystal really, and the family really had no option but to insert themselves in the management. It was being run by professional managers, and they had to take over. Had that not happened, had Crystal not been able to step in and take over that ownership, history would have been very different. It would be interesting to speculate about that, and it'll be interesting to hear what Crystal thinks about that. But I think you would have had a very different workout than actually happened. This is going to be a classic business case someday when it's written up. And the reason why I say that is no one would have approached this reorganization and workout the way Crystal did. No one outside of the family would have done that. And I'm eager for you to hear this story. But I'm going to give you a little peek of the story. The debt obligations were all paid. The number of employees that were laid off was much lower than would have been otherwise. And the company is today very healthy and growing. And the equity values have been very significantly preserved. And I do not think that would have happened otherwise. So there are many more things to tell about Crystal, but I'm just going to give you just one quote, one or two quotes that came from a reporter from the Salt Lake Tribune who wrote in August of 2010, after the company emerged from bankruptcy. He said this: "By all accounts, the resolution of Flying J's bankruptcy was atypical. Most insolvent companies are liquidated or dismantled piece by piece to settle their debts. Businesses that survive usually can't repay their debts in full, a black mark that can haunt them for years." That was not the case in this instance. Creditors were made whole, and Flying J protected its reputation. and every rival in the legal battle left the courtroom with their egos intact, unlike most bankruptcies, which are particularly adversarial clashes. If we had an opportunity to give Crystal another Distinguished Executive Alumnus Award, we would do so. But unlike the World Series, you can't win it twice in a row. So instead, what we did was we featured her in this magazine that you've all had a chance to see under the Vision piece, and we've invited her here today so that you can hear her story. Crystal is an incredible supporter of this school. She serves on the National Advisory Board. She and her family are extremely generous. It is a great pleasure and honor to welcome Crystal Maggelet here today to the Dean's Convocation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for coming today. I hope that if you are here for extra credit for some class, that you at least enjoy the story and pick something up and maybe tell your friends that it was a fun hour. I really want it to be a fun speech. I want to, sometimes I get up here, I was a little stiff. I gave my kids this speech last night, and my son said, "Mom, why don't you just hook the computer up? You sound like a computer-automated voice talking." So I'm going to really try to not get behind that podium and start sounding memorized. So I ask ahead of time to accept my, not preparedness or whatever you want to say it. I want to make this a lot more interactive if I can. I've left plenty of time for questions at the end. So if you do think of something, please write it down. Anything is fair game. I'll answer any question you want. Sometimes, as my employees would say, I might even answer it more honestly than you'd want me to. Anyway, with that, I'm going to get started. So I was born in Ogden, Utah in 1964. Oops, you know what? I should look at this. I think, let me get this where it's supposed to start. It's actually a service station. Take it off the screen. See, I told you. Okay. So this is, sorry, I should have just gone one more. Maybe? So this was the home I was brought home to in 1964. In 1960, my parents had gotten married, and my dad and mom bought this service station in Willard, Utah. They pulled a trailer up alongside, and my dad was the only employee. So he would be out there. He had the reputation for the cleanest windshields in town. So this is where I came home to. I wasn't there very long, though, because Flying J grew just like I grew. And, in Brigham City, Utah, you have a father that's an entrepreneur, and your mom doing the books. Your dad leaves on Monday to fly to the West Coast, and your mom's home all week. Your dad comes home on Friday, and that's your reality. It's a pretty good life, though, because you have one of the biggest houses in Brigham City, Utah. And sometimes, on Easter break and things, you get to climb in your twin-engine plane, and your dad flies you to California, and you stay at the Motel 6. Life is really, really good. I did. That's really how I felt back then. I thought I had the best life ever. My parents' business was growing. We were successful. It was all good. When I was until really, there's one flaw in it. When I was 10, my parents did get divorced, and so I became a little bit farther removed from Flying J and what my dad was doing. But I still had a great relationship with him and saw him often. And when I was 16, I was living in Bountiful, Utah, and I said to my dad, I really want a job. I was very independent. I wanted to have my own money, and I said to my dad, we've got all these convenience stores around. Can't I have a job at one? And he said, nope, too dangerous. So I went to McDonald's and got a job. I really, even as a young girl, I always wanted to leave all my doors and options open. And so one of the things as a kid, I don't know if you could really understand how you do that, and you can all appreciate it as you sit out in the audience, but to me it was to get good grades. So no matter what, I put grades ahead of everything I did in school. And I was a little quirky. I actually liked to listen to what people said, adults. I always liked to meet my parents' friends and say, what would you do if you had it to do over again? And I always got really good advice, and I listened, and it was through, some of my favorite advice really was good grades, My mom told me, don't get married. My mom got married when she was 18, 2 weeks after high school. That's what she told me. She didn't go to school after. She just constantly drilled in my head, don't get married. Get a college degree. She didn't say don't ever get married. She just said don't get married. My dad was in the background saying, follow your passion. Do what you want to do. Don't worry about our family business. You don't need to work at our family business. You should be independent. Don't worry about that. I want no pressure on you to work at our family business. So when I graduated from high school, and you probably hear the theme of my independence, I could have gone to Pepperdine right out of school, but it costs a lot of money, and I didn't have a scholarship there. Well, this fine institution, USU, gave me an academic scholarship. And again, I wanted to show my independence. So I decided that I would come to USU and get my the general education out of the way, and then I would move on from here. Well, I have to say that the 2 years I spent here on this campus, and I'm not just saying this because I'm here today, were the most fun college memories that I have. I joined Alpha Chi Omega. I was a pledge president. I joined STAB. Do they still call it STAB? It's Student Government? Student Activities Board, yes. We had a Christmas tree festival. I organized that. I don't know if you guys did it. I remember we actually got one of the local businesses at homecoming to give us a hot tub. We put on a flatbed truck. We rode in a hot tub down Main Street. That was pretty fun. But one of my finest memories is coming to 7:30 a.m. classes in this building, in this room, with my hair frozen solid from walking to class. Who can all relate to that? Anyway, I have very fond memories of this school and the opportunities it gave me. So, like I said, I really wanted to branch out. I always wanted to do more. So I chose a study abroad program called Semester at Sea. And Semester at Sea was a cruise around the world with 400 other kids from around the country. It was an amazing opportunity. I was gone for 100 days. You went to college on the boat. And it still exists, by the way, I believe. Chapman College now. It was University of Pittsburgh then. Highly recommend it. But I came back. When I went on that boat, I was just this girl from Utah. You know, I'd traveled, like I said, Motel 6 in California, stuff like that. But I literally saw every part of the world. And I came back a changed person. It made me really appreciate where I came from and our country and the opportunities that we have here that others weren't so fortunate to have. I went on to Pepperdine and graduated there. The reality is I only went to Pepperdine 2 semesters. So it's kind of funny. And, you know, I have braids and I have that medal. Well, I was sitting in the audience. I only tell in this audience because it's really funny. I was sitting in the audience and I didn't notice I was one of the only people with honors cords on. And I didn't really, and the dean is up there and he's talking and he's like, and the salutatorian, and he starts talking about Alpha Chi Omega, and he's put all the things that I did, and he's made them part of what Pepperdine does. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow, whoever that is sounds just like what I did at Utah State. And I was salutatorian. I had no idea till I was sitting in graduation, so it was very funny. And he used all the stuff I did here, no lie. It was very funny. So, finished Pepperdine. I finished in December, and all the school, everything. I had 5 transcripts. I finished school in 3.5 years. I don't know why. You guys don't, well, actually did it in 4, but you don't have to do it in 3.5. But I did it in 3.5, and I thought since I finished in 3.5 that I had some time. I graduated in December of 1985, and I had some time to find a job, right? I mean, I was ready. So I kind of did some things, dabbled around, worked on my resume. I honestly had no clue how to find a job. So one day, my dad in the spring called me and said, by the way, Monday morning there's a job at Flying J, and you'll be filling it. It's the only time in my life that he ever said, you'll work at Flying J, and I think he was just sick of me not working. So I figured, okay, well, that's another opportunity. I guess I'll take it on. So I went to work at Flying J. I worked in the refinery division for about a year, and then I worked in the retail division. I did the grand openings for our travel plazas we were building. But let's see, I was about 24, 25, 23, I guess, 24, and it still wasn't enough. Utah's a great place, but it still just wasn't enough. So I was like, okay, I had to find a way to have some other experiences. I was single, was having fun, I had a great career for a couple of years, so I decided I wanted to go to business school. And one of my friends told me Harvard did case study. And I really didn't, contrary to kind of how my educational background looks, I didn't really like school that much. I always did well, but I didn't really like it that much. And the concept of case study and actually hearing about real things was interesting to me. So I applied to Harvard, and because I'm a woman from Utah, take note, girls, okay? A woman from Utah, white male from Utah, I don't know, but woman from Utah, really good thing for Harvard. It was. I don't know. Is that fair? So I expect all you women to apply to Harvard Business School. Got it? Anyway, I ended up going there, and bar none, one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. The peer group there was top-notch. If I were to look them up, I actually keep in touch with many of them today, but if I were to look up almost all of the 800, they would have a track record now in their 40s that would astound any of us. It's very intimidating when you go to your reunions because these people do things. And being in that environment at the age of 25 is when I started there. And suddenly I found myself with other women, too, who had similar ambitions to me, which I really hadn't had that much. So I had a peer group that I had a lot in common with. Learned a great deal. Loved being back east. Loved Boston. I went to work. I wasn't ready to come home when I finished and graduated. So I actually went to work for a small company called Card Member Publishing. What I did, and this sounds really, really bad, what I did is go to large banks that had credit card portfolios and try to convince them that our company should telemarket to their customers. Doesn't that sound like fun? So I traveled all over the country, though, and I didn't know that I was really gaining experience for the next thing I was going to do because I stayed at all kinds of hotels all along the way. So I was gaining on-the-job experience, just in a roundabout way. And then there was the fateful weekend. In October of 1992, I was invited to a wedding in Calgary, Canada. Now, prior to that, I had told my father, you know what, sometime in the next couple of years, my stint back east is going to be over. I don't really want to be back east my whole life, and I'm meeting guys back here, and they want to be here, and this just isn't really going to work long term. And so I'm not in a hurry because I'm having a blast, but if an opportunity comes up, please let me know. So I told him I was going to this wedding in Calgary a couple months after I had that conversation. He said, well, stop back in Salt Lake on your way. I have an idea. So I said, okay. So I got on the plane to go to the wedding, and I landed in Calgary, Canada, and I had some friends. I was meeting friends there. We were renting one car. And they came up and they said, you know, do you remember Chuck Maggelet? And I said, yeah, I had 3 of 5 classes first semester, never said a word to him in business school. Yeah, I remember who he is. I said, well, he's had a horrible day. He's lost his luggage. He's missed his flights. You know, can we please just give him a ride to the hotel? I'm like, oh, all right, he can come, but he's not going out with us because he's not going out with us. We're going to go pick up guys. He's not going out with us. He'll ruin that. So Chuck came with us, and the next day I ended up at a breakfast table with him, and I ended up the rehearsal dinner. I ended up at the wedding. I ended up dancing at the wedding with him. And in all honesty, I never quit dancing with him. Today, I'm still dancing with him. I went from that wedding to Salt Lake. I met with my dad, and he told me he'd found some land in Salt Lake, and he wanted to build a hotel there. And he was partners in Oregon with someone who had a limited service hotel that was doing really well, and he wanted to kind of pattern the hotel after that. And did I want to do it? Of course I wanted to do it. Are you kidding? My dad delegated everything. He delegated everything. This is going to be my business. It was exciting. I signed on the dotted line, and I went back east for 6 months because the company I worked for is very small, and I didn't want to, and I was their salesperson, so I wanted to make sure I transitioned from that. During that time, that guy, Chuck, and I dated a lot, and he was back east, and by the time we moved back, he moved back with me 6 months later, and we got married in October of 1993, just 1 year after that October meeting in Calgary. So I was back in Utah for a reason, though. There was a piece of land in downtown Salt Lake. It had 9 buildings on it, and I believe it was like 6 parcels of land that my dad had pieced together to do this hotel. And only my dad could have seen that as an opportunity, the way that the land all laid out. But there are 9 buildings. My first task was to get them destroyed and figure out the asbestos. And then I had to, decide on how the accounting system I'd have, what GM I'd have, what interior decorating, what linens, what amenities I wanted to offer, what the logo was going to look like, what the name. And by the way, crystalline was not my choice. That was a holdover from my dad. Anyway, Chuck helped me a lot through the process. And in April of 1994, we opened the downtown Crystalline. Now, in that time in Salt Lake, there were not enough rooms. It was just, everybody was clamoring. They were having the Women's Bowling Association, I'm not kidding, the Women's Bowling Association convention. And we committed our rooms to it. And we had like 3 or 4 days left to get ready. We had all this furniture to move in. And we had been working our people so hard. It was Easter Sunday. And the Saturday before, a family came in, a bride, and she was looking at our hotel for her wedding guest or whatever. And I said, hey, do you want a free jacuzzi room after, when you get married? And she's like, yeah. I said, come tomorrow with as many people as you can find to help me move furniture. And they did. So I gave my employees the day off, and I had this crew of people that was moving furniture into the hotel. So we got it done. We got it done contrary to what the Salt Lake lodging people thought. I didn't know this at the time. I learned it a couple years later from some of our employees. But rumor had it that there's no way this woman coming out of nowhere, her dad had helped her, she doesn't have a bit of hotel experience, there is no way this is going to work. No way. So I had to show them wrong, of course, even though I honestly didn't know that was happening at the time. That's pretty typical for me, too. This was our first office. Chuck actually worked for AT&T for a year when we moved here, but after he couldn't join me. And this was in the Salt Lake Hotel, and that was our first office. Obviously, the boxes weren't there, but it was still no windows, a little hole in the wall. Then we actually picked up Flying J's hotels. They had 9 hotels at the time. We picked up management of those hotels, so suddenly we had 11. This is what your office looks like as a startup. We did get a little bit better. So this is Logan. Who's breaking ground in Logan. Let's see if I can be good with this. See that? I didn't just eat a big lunch. 2 weeks later, I had our first child, Drew. He went with us to the hotels. He took his first steps. That's an actual picture in Gulfport, Mississippi, when we opened a hotel. A couple of years later, we're at West Valley. We're cutting the ribbon. We're opening the hotel. A little unusual again. The next day, 3 weeks early, I had my daughter, Lexi, and it was so early that we had plans to close a loan, and we really needed the loan, and we were opening the hotel. We had to have the money to open the hotel. The banker had to come to my hospital room when I'm in labor to have me sign the loan documents. I used to have a picture of me in the hospital bed in this presentation, I should have. And now I had 2. Now, Chuck and I, we're very busy working with 2 kids. And I don't know if people believe this or not, but with 2 kids, really, he and I could work full time. We were a partnership. We really could do it, and it was great, and it was fun. But I knew if we had a 3rd child that it wasn't going to work that way. It wasn't going to be fair to the kid. Not that we couldn't do it. It just wasn't going to be fair to the kid. So we decided we love kids. Chuck was a great father. We felt like long-term it was really important to have more children for us. We wanted to have more kids around when we got older. So we made a decision that we'd have a 3rd child, which to me, I knew that was going to mean kind of the end of my career as I had known it at the time. So I went in for my first ultrasound. They put the little wand on my belly, and it's kind of blurry because there's 2. Anyway, I ended up having twins. And at that ultrasound, I told Chuck, I said, I'm giving my notice now because there's no way. So I actually backed away from the day-to-day of Crystal Inn in 2000. And honestly, we backed away from growing the hotels. We had 14 hotels at the time. We were making a great living. We had a wonderful life. We traveled all over. This is in Africa. I don't think they'd even let you get near your kids by an elephant here. But we did all kinds of things as a family. We enjoyed our kids. It was an amazing time. But I have to admit that I felt a little out of the loop because I really, I was working. I didn't have any day-to-day. I'd go to Flying J board meetings. I'd participate in Crystal Inn meetings. But there was something missing just a little, honestly, from how I felt. But I was really happy. I had everything. I'm going to stop there about me. You've heard enough about me. I'm going to actually move on to Flying J. I'm going to go backwards here. Okay, so I mentioned my dad would fly on Monday and come back on Friday. That's because he was opening self-service stations on the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington. He was a pilot, and maybe it was an excuse to fly his plane and leave his family. I don't know, but the excuse he used is that our cousins, who now own Maverick, were competing in Utah, and he didn't want to compete with them when he opened his stations. So he went to the West Coast. He was a pioneer in the self-service market, and then from there moved on to convenience stores. Now, of course, you have to supply them, so you might as well get some trucks to supply those stores. And if you're going to get some trucks and you're going to be taking the trucks to the refinery, you might as well have one of those too. And if you're going to have a refinery and you're going to be producing fuel, you might as well be drilling for crude oil too. And so by the late, early 80s, we were a fully integrated oil company. We'd acquired in 1980 Thunderbird, 1980, 81, 82 Thunderbird Oil, which kind of put us into that realm. We were very small, but my father could say we were a fully integrated oil company. In 1979, we opened our first travel plaza in Ogden, Utah. My dad designed the truck stop to be a home away from home for the trucker. He wanted them to feel good there. He was a clean freak, and he thought truckers should be treated nicer than they had been around the country. It paid off, and in that first year, we were voted by the truckers one of the top 10 truck stops in the whole United States, even in Ogden, Utah, which wasn't a main thoroughfare for the truckers. My dad knew he was onto something, and we ended up acquiring, Husky Oil in 1986, which brought us more truck stops. And then in 1991, let's see what I've got here. In 1991, I saved the wrong one. That's why I'm like, where am I at? In 1991, we partnered with ConocoPhillips, really in an effort to grow the travel plaza chain network across the country with some added capital from a partner. We also added other services for the truckers. We added a bank called Tab Bank and a credit card processing company called TCH. We are all about doing everything in the oil business for everybody and the truckers and traveling public. So in the early 90s, really, Phil Adams started working for Flying J, I believe, in 1980. But he was very instrumental in the Husky deal. He's very instrumental in a lot of deals. He was instrumental in putting together a point-of-sale system for our travel plazas. My dad was very impressed with him. So by the late 80s, early 90s, my dad had basically kind of backed off. Remember I told you my dad unlike many entrepreneurs, my dad was willing to delegate if he found somebody who was talented. And he believed Phil was a very talented person. Phil is a very talented and bright person. So my dad really had given him the reins by the early 90s or so. He and his management team, it took a team, not just Phil. So he and his management team at that point kept growing. That looks a lot different than that first picture I showed you. We really learned what people wanted and what truckers wanted, and we built beautiful plazas across the country for them to stop at. We had a lot of them, as you can see, all the stars. So what did I do right then? What was my role at Flying J? I was a member of the board from when I was 18 years old. I attended a monthly management meeting with about 100 managers that would stand up and say what they were working on in the company. And I started something with my dad in the early 2000s where, because we had roughly 12 different companies, we would meet with them once a year, and their groups would present to us as stockholders. But I had no day-to-day responsibility. These things proved invaluable to me in December of 2008. So in 2003, my dad died in an unfortunate accident in a plane crash. I was devastated by his death, and it was the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life. But my dad and mom had been divorced since I was 10, and he hadn't been around a whole lot. But it was still very traumatic, because suddenly he had this, what I viewed kind of as an empire, and now my brother and I were the owner, and even though we weren't working there, what does that mean, and what's your responsibility at this point? I felt like I needed to step it up a bit, but at that point, those 4 kids were 2 to 6 years old. So they were still very, very young. I began to meet with Phil one-on-one more often, and I made sure I attended all the meetings that I was just describing. But during that time, we made a couple of acquisitions. We bought the Longhorn Pipeline, which is a 700-mile pipeline across the Gulf of Texas. That's not right. Did I say that right? From the Gulf, sorry. I didn't say that right. And we also bought a refinery in Bakersfield, California. We didn't know, honestly, I don't think we really knew much about these businesses. We never owned a pipeline. And we owned a refinery, but we didn't know the California market. But that was not unusual in our history. My dad had taken on a lot of things he didn't understand and learned along the way. So it wasn't that big of a red flag. You know, we never really celebrated our success at Flying J in a big way. We were a really conservative company. But I convinced Phil in the fall of 2008, we had a lot of employees that were, you know, had worked for us 20 plus years. They were getting close to retirement. I really wanted them, as they were going out, to have a celebration because we'd been so successful. So we took all our top executives to the Mediterranean for a luxury cruise. This is fall of 2008. I came home to be recognized at Utah. So, you know, things had been really good at Flying J. If you look, in 2000, we had $4.3 billion in sales. And by 2008, we had $18.5 billion in sales. If I showed you that, would you guys think anything was wrong? Would you be concerned if your dad was away from running the business? And, you know, I mean, what's not to like, right? What's not to like is what was going on in the fall of 2008. Oil had hit a high at $140 a barrel in the summer, and it was plummeting down in price. Now, that might have been okay if you weren't a company that had a lot of inventory in oil or finished gasoline, diesel products. And it might have been okay if you had the right credit facilities to weather that storm. Unfortunately, on the Longhorn Pipeline, we had a credit facility that adjusted based on crude price. So when crude price went up to 140, we took the money out from that facility, and every day, I believe it's day, wasn't it, Andre? Every day, we had to pay it back because crude was falling. So it was sucking every bit of cash out of the company. And to make matters worse, we had our companies divided into many different businesses. So we were not supposed to, per bank covenants, take money from one company to help another company out. So we had this big dilemma going on. Now, honestly, I was not aware of it, but it was happening all through the fall of 2008. We were running the company out of cash. We were doing great business-wise, as I recall. The refinery was doing well. The travel plazas were making money. Bakersfield and Longhorn had never really, Bakersfield for moments in time, but had never really turned the corner to be that profitable. But the other businesses were doing great. But day by day, we were running out of cash. So December 15th, I actually had gotten a hint. Actually, prior to December 15th, I had gotten a hint that we were in trouble with cash. Because we weren't buying back stock from our employees. Our employees had stock ownership, and every time they wanted to sell, we would always buy it back, no questions asked. And I heard through the grapevine that we were not doing that. And I went to the controller and I said, why are we not doing that? He said, we're short on cash. I said, you're kidding, we're $18.5 billion. Somebody wants $100,000 for stock. What's that about? No, Crystal, we're really low on cash. December 15th, it still never struck me. I was too, I just thought Flying J was this, there's no way. What? So December 15th, I'm Christmas shopping, and luckily I'm kind of finishing up Christmas shopping, which is unusual for me for that early in December. And I remember I was buying a wakeboard for my kids. I was in a sporting goods store, and the general counsel from Flying J calls me, and he says, you know, I just got off a conference call with Bank of America, and they asked who our bankruptcy counsel is, our bankruptcy attorney. I said, what? What are you talking about? He said, they expect they'll put us into Chapter 11 by Friday. I said, what? Anyway, needless to say, my world came to a screeching halt. Life as I had known it just changed in a big, big, big way. I called a past CFO of ours who I was in very close contact with, and I said, get meetings in New York City. We got to raise money. We got to get money. We got to have money to pay our crude bills by Friday, or we're going to be in bankruptcy. And Bank of America is not happy with us, and if they pull our line of credit, revolver actually, right? If they pull our revolver and turn us off on Friday, when crude bills are due on the 20th of every month, and they're big, millions of dollars, if they pull our revolver, we don't have a chance. And they were threatening to do that. It was likely they would do that. So our past CFO got a couple meetings with some bankers he knew in New York City, and so I walked in my closet. First, I sent my kids down, actually. I sent my kids down, and I said, you know what? So they're 8 to 13 now. And I set them down, and I said, you know what? Something very bad has happened at Flying J, and Mommy's not going to be here for 6 months. You're not going to see me for 6 months. And my husband was out of town. I went into my closet. I'd kind of been being a mom. It was 2008. I really kind of stepped out in 2000. I'm like, what in the world are they wearing in New York City? A skirt, pants, what am I wearing? But honestly, that was kind of the least of my worries. Got to New York, luckily met with some banks, stayed a couple extra days, trying. Luckily, we were not able to raise any money. And why I say luckily is because I really believe in my heart, if we'd been able to raise more money, we just would have been deeper in debt and prolonged our bankruptcy a couple more months. And I might not be here today if that had happened. So I really don't begrudge. Bank of America did pull our credit line, which did cause us to file for bankruptcy the following Monday. While I was in New York, I did take some advice someone had given me, and they said you've got to have a big legal firm if you are going to go into bankruptcy. So I had gone and hired Kirkland & Ellis. They'd been recommended by one of the banks I'd been in, and they told me to hire an investment bank. I hired Blackstone. They told me to hire a public relations firm in New York, which definitely turned out to be great that we did, so I hired that while I was there. So my trip to New York did pay off. You can't tell how blurry that picture is, but that's how it felt. That was the controller, the past CFO, and my brother as we were trying to work our way through New York. So this was my new place of employment. From that day forward, I was working nonstop. It was a tough time to know where I fit in. I wasn't the leader of the company. Phil was there. And so it's like, where do I fit in? I was sort of floating around, talking to Phil's direct reports, watching a company that was, and a leader that was paralyzed. He's devastated, in my opinion. I did that for 3 weeks, and during that time, we obviously had, oops, I'm skipping again, sorry. So we filed on December, I'm going to back up. We filed on December 22nd. It was free-fall bankruptcy. Free-fall bankruptcy means you have no planning. Most big companies the size of Flying J would have planned for months, had deals worked out with people, gracefully went into bankruptcy. No, we were crashing. We were going to do free-fall bankruptcy December 22nd. This meant that our employees learned on December 21st that the next day the company that they felt was rock solid, that they felt they got a paycheck from every day consistently for years, was going to be in bankruptcy. And the vendors that they had been talking to for years and relationships that they had, touting what a great company they worked for, was not going to pay them. All their friends and colleagues. And by the way, on top of that, it's December 22nd, and you've got to convince that colleague from that other company to keep supplying you when you already owe them money. And convince them we're going to pay them up front now, but please don't quit supplying us, because if you quit supplying our travel plazas with fuel and our refineries with crude oil, then we won't have anything to sell, and we'll run out of cash, and we'll be done. And our employees spent their holidays making sure, and I give them full credit, making sure that we're here today and that company kept running. Going back to kind of what I was doing, I was working with the professionals a lot. We had lost, in my opinion, complete credibility with everybody. Vendors, employees, banks, you name it. And in bankruptcy, there is a fraternity, really, I call it a fraternity, I don't know if they do, but of professional people, attorneys, bankers, consultants, and they all work in this fraternity of bankruptcy. And they move from company to company, and creditors committee to creditors committee. But they're all kind of friends, and they will and deal with each other, regardless of the side that they're on that particular case. But we had to have them because everybody was demanding. We had no credibility as a company. So I was going through the motion, getting Kirkland & Ellis in, Blackstone. Zolfo Cooper became their company. A guy was represented by them. He became our chief restructuring officer. So the chief restructuring officer, I thought, it sounds like a good name, right? They're supposed to come and kind of make it all better, and they know how to do everything, and life's all good. I mean, I knew nothing about bankruptcy. I'm learning all this on the fly. So about 3 weeks after we went into bankruptcy, and watching Phil be, honestly, I felt kind of paralyzed, not really able to lead the company. We still had a lot of businesses that weren't in bankruptcy. 3 of our businesses were, but we had several others that weren't, and their leaders needed guidance. But Phil, actually, I met with Phil, and Phil resigned. And he said to me, we both kind of talked, and I said, well, sleep on this and call me tomorrow, we'll decide the timing. So I'm driving up to the office the next day at 7 a.m., and he called me and he said, I'm not coming back at all. And I said, okay, and that was January of 2009, I have not spoken with him again. It was amicable, but I have not spoken with him again. So now what? So I call these professionals, right, because really they have to know everything that's going on. You have to tell them everything. You can't just do anything on your own. And they tell me, well, that's an easy thing. That's why you have your CRO. He'll step in and run the company. There's no problem. He's been with us 1 week. 1 week. Okay, well, all right. So I go to the people who'd worked for Phil, his direct reports, and I meet with each of them one-on-one, and I tell them Phil's left, and they kind of go, yeah, I'm sure this was devastating. And I say, John Boken, our CRO, is going to run the going to take his place. And their faces, almost 100% of their faces that I met with 12 of them that day were just like, you got to be kidding. And I was like, I was a stockholder. I was a big stockholder. And I was chairman of the board. And what did that mean for me, even if I dared do it, what did it mean for me as a stockholder to become CEO? And the next day it became apparent to me I really didn't care what that meant, because the employees basically had come to me in small groups or one-to-one and said, Crystal, please don't do this. Anything else, please just take this on. And that's all I needed, and I stepped into the role. Do you have a different memory? No? Okay. Anyway, I always wonder if the employees would have a different memory. So I have a couple up here. That's why I'm checking facts with them through the speech. Sorry about that. Anyway, so I stepped into the role, but I got a corner office out of the deal. Now I was really working 60-hour weeks and traveling all over the country. I had creditors to talk to, vendors to talk to. You know, some of the most heartbreaking stories is when I had a vendor call me, and he was a very, very small company, and he was going to have to go into bankruptcy because of our bankruptcy. You know, I mean, that was just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And there's absolutely nothing. He needed like $1,000. You know, it's like, and there's nothing I could do, because once you are in bankruptcy, you can't have preference to anybody. And it was horrible. I hated those phone calls because I felt so badly. And that's where it became very clear to me we were going to pay people back. And I told the creditors committee that in February of that year. I said, we will pay everybody back, 100%. I don't care how we do it. We have a valuable company, and we will make it happen. But it was drinking from a fire hose in a big way. We were not as efficient as we needed to be, considering we needed every bit of cash we had to operate on a day-to-day basis. So I actually held a I held a brainstorming session and basically brought in a lot of managers, and we actually were quite an innovative company, so we always had a lot of things out there that weren't making money that we were working on that were going to make money someday. We literally, in that meeting, basically got a whiteboard and cut those things out. Just boom, boom, boom. I asked the managers if they thought they were worthwhile. It basically was like a vote, and we would cut them out. Of course, this led to layoffs. The first time in Flying J's history. I think we laid off 200 people, maybe, in January of 2009. Of course, in January of 2009, lots of companies were laying people off, but I still felt very badly about it. We did something good, though. We, in that same brainstorming session, someone raised their hand, and they said, you know, because everything was open territory, and they said, you know, what I'd really like is if we could not wear ties anymore to work. I said, take it off. And so everybody got to take their ties off, and I haven't seen very many since then, except these 2 employees that showed up today. They wouldn't have these on at our office. I needed to rein the professionals in. Who was I? I was like this mom who happened to have a Harvard MBA, who'd been in semi-retirement since 2000, and I thought I could run this 16th largest private company. We're the professionals. We're in the bankruptcy fraternity. We understand bankruptcy. We'll tell you what to do. You know, that really wasn't going to work for me, and I didn't really know how. They weren't going to coach me. That CRO was not going to tell me how to reorganize, and I learned that pretty quickly. It took me about a month, and I'd invite him to meetings. I expect him to lead it. No, he'd sit there. So the only thing I thought of is I've got to understand what everybody's doing. There's too many moving parts. And so I demanded, basically, we have a biweekly conference call on Monday and Thursday morning. Everybody had to get on it, our employees and the professionals, and talk about what they're doing. We talked strategy. And I think, as small of a thing as that was, it really helped me to connect. I usually did it in my car on the drive to Ogden. I could think about things, and I became to better understand the situation we were in and all the moving parts. We need a DIP loan. What's a DIP loan? A debtor in possession loan. You need it because you're going to run out of cash. Well, we're not running out of cash. We're operating fine on our own cash. We don't have any assets to offer up for a DIP loan, really, that anybody wants. No, we're in the bankruptcy world. We know you need a dip loan, you need it now. By Memorial Day, you're out of cash. It's a 3-day weekend. You know you're going to be out of cash. Our cash flows show it. You better find a dip loan. Well, in the first quarter of 2009, you weren't going to find any money, let alone a dip loan. Not from the people you'd want a dip loan from, anyway. It's what I wasted a lot of my time on in the early months of the bankruptcy, trying to reach out to people to see if they would loan us money. Business wasn't so good really either. Diesel fuel sales were down 20% year over year, but we were still making money. That was the good part. We were still making money, cranking along. Not sure what. So, but things are not looking so good with these pro formas that the professionals are doing. It doesn't look like there's going to be any stockholder value. Now, really, mostly I wanted to pay people back. So that was kind of okay, but if you started talking there wasn't going to be stockholder value, you started talking what percent people were going to take on what you owed them also. And that didn't always look like 100% payout, and I didn't like to talk about that. So I had a lot of phone calls from people who call and say, I can help you out. Let me tell you how I can help you. I am going to solve your problem today. And what did they want to do? They wanted to buy the company or loan us money at a very low price, get in the door so they could buy the company at a very low price. They were bottom feeders, so to speak. We were still running out of cash, kind of. At least it looked like we were going to run out of cash. I did something that actually I really regret, but I think it's part of the story and part of the time in the second quarter, second quarter by then of 2009. All I was hearing in the news was bailout, 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 and I'm in the throes of bankruptcy. I am desperate. The car dealer, everybody's getting bailout. So, okay, I'll hire a lobbyist, and I'll go to Washington, D.C., and I'll meet with our state representatives, and I'll ask for bail. I'll put my hat in. I met with Senator Bennett, who basically looked at me and said, this is not where government should be. And he was dead on. That's right. Government should not be there. And I shouldn't have been there. And I ran home. But that's how desperate I was. So the Longhorn Pipeline. So we knew we needed to sell our businesses, the ones that were losing money. And you know what? Do some people need to go to class? I didn't realize I'm...
Another 5 minutes or so.
Okay. Okay, well, just if you need to go, just go ahead. So anyway, we knew we needed to sell our losing businesses. I didn't mention, but we had shut down Bakersfield and Longhorn very early on in the process. We were able to get some money, and when the pipeline had winter product on it and we needed to get it off by spring, we were able to raise enough money to get the pipeline to move for a short amount of time to get that product off. But other than that, those two assets had been shut down. Bakersfield was actually what we called in warm. We were keeping it warm, so we laid off a lot of employees, but we were still spending about $3 million a month to just keep it sellable because nobody would want to buy a shut-down refinery, and there's a lot of environmental issues and stuff. So the Longhorn Pipeline was sort of first to go up for sale. And we thought this was a pretty good asset. We had lost a ton of money on it, but we had sort of ran it in a very weird way strategically. So we had quite a few bidders. It was pretty optimistic. So we opened the bids the day they came in, and we had a bid at $225 million. It's a good bid, not bad. Bid number 2, $25 million. Whew, better keep that top bidder. And that one, I have to say, the investment bank we hired made that happen and kept that $225 million bid for us on the Longhorn Pipeline, and we were able to sell it for that. The next bidder, $25 million. Huge difference in outcome. Okay, so along the way, you're a big company. You kind of get some toys. So this plane was purchased for $18 million. I had an offer for $13 million. Haircut of $5 million. Ugh. But all right, better do it. Better do it. Underwater, going to owe money on the loan, can't even get out from under the loan of that. If we had kept this plane, do you know what I'd get for it today? 10 or 9. So at the time, it seemed like, that this kind of stuff is not recovered is kind of what I'm saying. So even at the time, it seemed like a horrible haircut. But the interesting thing about that plane and toys that people acquire, That plane, because of the little amount of time it was actually used, every hour that we flew on it cost $35,000. So every time we took it up in the air, $35,000 an hour. You can charter a plane for roughly $1,500 to $2,000 an hour for Millionaire, and that's still a lot, obviously. Anyway, it was a good thing to get rid of some of these toys. Expiration Production went up on the block next. Expiration Production was a company that was not in bankruptcy, that was doing well. It was a small oil company. I hated to sell it, frankly, but the creditors were demanding that we keep doing more, that we bring more cash to the table to get out of bankruptcy. So we sold it, and we got lucky, actually. Some of the creditors committee were people who potentially wanted to acquire this company, which is why, in my opinion, it had to go on the block, and they thought they'd get it for nothing. But luckily for us, there was a bidding war, and we ended up getting a lot more for this company than we thought. And again, it contributed to where we ended up to exit. So, as I said, it's June of 2009. We're selling off businesses. The future's looking kind of... We did pass Memorial Day, though, and kept cash. Now our date was to Labor Day. I think we had a short blip around July 4th, but it looked like we'd make it Labor Day now. So it's pushed out. But we're still a little bit desperate. ConocoPhillips, our partner, and I should have mentioned them earlier, they helped us in the beginning by giving us credit so we could keep supplying our stores. But after that, they were kind of mad. I mean, they were fine with me, but they're kind of mad about what we'd done, and they could have helped us with the DIP loan, and they were willing to, but they really wanted to take control of the company to do that, so I wasn't very willing to do that with them, and we're going back and forth, and meanwhile, these loan-to-own people are coming, and I keep getting these phone calls from Jimmy Haslam, who's the CEO of Pilot Travel Centers, and I also, at the same time, hear rumors that Pilot's going to buy us. Well, that wasn't true, and I kept telling people, that's not true, that's all rumor, that's not true. Well, Jimmy kept calling, and I thought he was starting the rumors, and so I'd say, well, you know what, as long as you're telling people that you're going to buy us, I'm not going to meet with you, because then my word isn't very good, is it? And finally, he convinced me to meet with him, and that was in June, that same June, and I had lunch with him. He's a Southern gentleman. He pretty tall, full head of gray hair, very nice man. He comes in, he starts kind of telling me about how he runs his travel centers. And I immediately see that he's the best CEO in the industry. It's clear. The things that I know we need to do to run our travel plazas better, but that we can't do in bankruptcy, like invest capital to make them nicer because they're all run down, and to lease our restaurants out, he's doing all that, and he gets it. And he's writing we're at Metropolitan Cafe in Salt Lake, and he's writing all these notes on the table because they have paper tablecloths, and he's talking about everything, and he appreciates the brand. He understands what Flying J means. He's like, I don't want to change the brand. In fact, we'll be partners. You can own as much of the company. We'll throw in each of what we have, and it'll be great, and we'll be partners forever. We both have family. Their family was very similar to ours. Their dad started the company. And, I left that meeting, and I had huge hope. And I knew it would be painful, but I knew we were going to get a deal done. The deal was done on the tablecloth in the Metropolitan Cafe, which I did not take, and I regret to this day. But I went away. I called up our investment banker, and I told him about the deal. I said, Pilot's going to provide a DIP loan, and then we're going to do this deal. And he literally said to me, he said, Crystal, if you get that deal done, pigs will fly. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. 10 days later, the deal was conceptually done. The LOI, letter of intent, was put together. And I was very proud of that. Wasn't sure. So we're going to do a merger. Everybody's happy. We're going to pay people 100%, most likely. We're going to get out of bankruptcy in the fall of 2009, likely. We just have to go to the FTC. Why? Monopoly? 1 and 2 in the truck stop industry? But wait a minute. Flying J goes after owner-operators. That's our market. And Pilot does large fleets. So why in the world would there be a problem here? Just because we're 1 and 2? Only 3 of our 25 top customers from each of our companies overlapped. Our attorneys were telling us, this is not a problem. This is not an issue. Well, it was an issue for the FTC. So they started doing things like subpoena, I can't say that right, stuff, and doing depositions. And of course, they were going to depose the CEO of the company. And of course, they were going to take the hard drive of the CEO of the company off her laptop. So our IT guys from Flying J came in one day and they said, I'm going to take your laptop because I need your hard drive to send to the FTC. And I said, okay. A couple nights later, I'm laying in bed and I wake up and I go, my journal is on my hard drive. My journal, I wrote a journal throughout this whole process, and I honestly didn't remember what I wrote in it. It was generally a chronological journal, but still, it's like, and I figured, I could call the IT department because they probably still have it, and I could say, I didn't mean for my journal to be on there, and I don't want to send that to the FTC. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to send the message to even our employees that I have something to hide. So I'm going to roll the deck, roll the cards, and I'm going to say, we were sending them so much documentation, so much stuff. They'll never find that little teeny file on my hard drive. Well, time for deposition. My attorney calls to prepare me. The first thing out of her mouth, Crystal, you wrote in your journal on da-da-da-da-da-da that this is what happened. I'm like, she wasn't...
Did you write it in German?
No. Clip art at 10 at night, okay? I didn't write it at all. I typed it. This is as good as it gets at that time. I don't have that kind of staff. Andre's got bigger and better things to do. Anyway, so that was sort of, I just thought, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Luckily, I guess I had written things that didn't work in the FTC's favor, because when I actually got in the deposition, they didn't ask me anything from my journal. So the dill actually, it was like mounds and mounds. Even though that dill was on a tablecloth, it actually turned into reams and reams and reams of paper. But we finally actually officially signed the dill in December of 2009. But it was purely for show, because we couldn't do a thing with where the FTC stood on the issue. And things were not looking any better with the FTC. In fact, they were threatening that we would have to sue to be able to close the merger by December of that year. You know what, though? Oh, and the Bakersfield refinery, that had been up for sale. Now, we weren't as lucky with the Bakersfield refinery as we were with Longhorn, and we didn't have very many buyers. In fact, we had about no buyers. But we had a buyer clear back in August, and now it's December, and they're still saying they're going to buy it, but they're not doing anything to buy it, and I'm paying $3 million a month to keep it running for them, because they're the only person who's going to buy it. So do I just stop the madness and shut the refinery down? Because they're going to walk away in 4 months anyway. So I might as well cut my losses. So I decided to play a game of chicken. And I went to our president of the company, and I said, of the refining division, I said, okay, Fred, you have to the end of January. You go tell this buyer that the refinery is being shut down the end of January, and if they want it up and running when they buy it, they better put their money where their mouth is. And Fred's like, are you serious? I said, yeah, I'm serious. We're going to do press releases the end of January. If those buyers haven't stepped to the plate, they're done. They stepped to the plate. Another one, there's like, whew, okay. So North Salt Lake Refinery. The North Salt Lake Refinery, today you all pass it, it was not in any of these deals. And now with all these other piece parts in place, we potentially could just refinance that and keep it. We still needed the cash, but we could refinance it. The creditors still, it wasn't enough. Wasn't enough, all the things we've done. You got to sell it. You got to put up for sale. If the pilot deal doesn't come together, you're going to have to sell it. You might as well get it up for sale. I fought it and fought it and fought it. Finally, everybody was telling me I had to sell it. So we put it up for sale. Every call we got to find out more about the refinery, potential buyers, well, we can meet about 5 years from yesterday. We just didn't give people the time of day, right or wrong, because we really wanted to refinance that refinery, not sell it. So this was my house of cards in the fall of 2009, because every one of those deals, the pilot merger, the Bakersfield sale, the refinance of the North Salt Lake refinery, how our employees were holding out, you name it, any one of those things, if they would have slipped, the whole plan would have gone away, potentially. It felt like it was a house of cards. But we had time on our side. So even though I'm complaining about the Federal Trade Commission, I'm just doing that for show, because the reality is the longer they waited, the more our profitable businesses brought cash to the table for our exit. So even though I pretended that I thought, oh, it's so bad the FTC is doing this, as long as the FTC was finally going to approve the merger, it was fine to go on and on and on and on indefinitely, because we were still getting the cash from our businesses. And we had plenty of cash by that point. Everybody's happy. The creditors feel like everything's going to be good. Everybody's just a little nervous about how the FTC will go. But we didn't know what the FTC would do, so we had to put together a contingency plan. So we had to write. So what we did is I actually enlisted our middle management from each of our companies, and they wrote a business plan without pilot. And many of our companies didn't go with pilot, so it was, we needed to do it anyway. And I also met a lot with ConocoPhillips to talk about what it would be like to continue our partnership. They had also sold, after we sold or merged, Conoco sold to Pilot their share. So they were and they got a very good price, so they were very anxious to have the FTC approve this deal too, and they really didn't want to stay our partner. They wanted the cash. But we were working with them, trying to make sure if something happened. Spring 2010, it finally all came together, and how it came together is the FTC decided if we had 450 plus travel plazas, we needed to sell 26. Well, normally when you sell, as I sort of talked about in the other business, you kind of put it out there that something's for sale, and then you hope you get bids. We did that, but the FTC has basically gone to the competitor they wanted to buy the 26 units and said, we really want you to buy these, and you're the only buyer that we're going to approve. It really didn't make for good negotiating power, and we kind of took a big haircut on those 26 travel plazas. But we did get FTC approval, and the Bakersfield sale did close. And the Flying J brand continues. That's not the end. So the close was June 30th of 2010. By July 6th, we were back in Delaware, which is where our bankruptcy was filed, and we were at the court exiting bankruptcy. It was 1.53 years after filing, and we paid everybody back 100 cents on the dollar plus interest. And when I say plus interest, in some cases we owed crude suppliers several $1 million, and we had defaulted on their contracts, which made the interest rate 18 to 20%. We tried to negotiate, and some people were nice about it, and they didn't make us. That was better return than they got in any bank then. But that's okay, because we'd screwed up, and we needed to make it right. These are all those professionals that I kept talking about, but that was obviously a very happy day in our history. So we paid 5,775 claims that came to almost $2 billion. What if I told you guys you had to come up with $2 billion? If somebody would have told me that in December of 2008, I think I would have gone out the door running. But we did it. We paid everybody back. So one of the biggest honors, and I have tried not to be too mean about the professionals and attorneys and everybody that came in, but one of the biggest honors that anybody could pay me is that we had a big celebration dinner with all these professionals who really, I had to earn their respect. I feel like I had to earn their respect. I was coming out of nowhere. And they paid me a very wonderful honor. They gave me this award, which they made up, called the Ernest Shackleton Award. Ernest Shackleton in 1914 led an expedition of 28 people to Antarctica. Along the way, the water froze, his boat collapsed. He took the lifeboat, 4 guys. 2 years later, he came back, rescued everybody, lived, and it's a great story. So that was a huge honor for those professionals to pay to me, and it made me very happy. Okay. Now just the fundamentals. Basic bottom line restructure. Take all the businesses that are making money and keep them. Get rid of all the businesses that are losing money. The one exception, as I mentioned, oil and gas. The other thing that's interesting about this, look at that, restructure fees. You know why that's in there? The penalty for bankruptcy cost us somewhere around $80 million that all went to attorneys, investment bankers, whoever that touched our case in a year and a half, $80 million. So that had to be on top of all the other stuff that we paid. They were helpful. They were helpful. I didn't know anything about bankruptcy. I would have been in trouble without them. Okay, so what are we today? So Julie didn't ask me to change the name of Flying J. We could have kept calling ourselves Flying J. But I just thought Flying J was our retail facilities, really. That's what you all knew as Flying J. And so I decided that we would change our name to FJ Management. And really, because we were no longer a fully integrated oil company, what we are today is a diversified business with several different businesses that may or may not work together. But we have today, and something else that I'm very proud of is that I think Andre found, or someone found an old budget that was done in like 2006 or 2007, and it projected out 5 years. We will make as much money this year as that budget projected, with the bankruptcy being in the picture. So that, to me, it's like, we didn't miss a beat. Just a little one. So today we have the Big Rust Refinery. It's in North Salt Lake. We own it 100%. It's a great asset for us. It's a bit of a risky asset. Anytime you own something that can blow up, you have to make sure it's insured and run safely and properly. My husband and I, it's in turnaround. My husband and I got a tour a couple weeks ago. We got to crawl in some of the units. It was pretty fun. We have a bank, an industrial bank. It was tailored to the transportation industry, but now we're branching out into other industries. Pilot Flying J, we have a minority stake, but it's going to be, I believe, it'll fall in the top 10 private companies this year. And so having even a minority stake is huge. I'm still very involved with Pilot Flying J, and I care a lot about our brand and what happens to it. I'm on the board. TCH, we're partners 50-50 with Pilot on. It's a credit card processing company that's very specific to the transportation and trucking business. Okay. You guys sick of me yet? Okay, so when I had a couple of speeches that my dad had given. I happened to be fortunate enough that I had him. And one of them was from Utah State in 1993, which was interesting. He spoke on customer service and marketing. But another one was from a commencement speech that he gave at Soda Springs High. And in that speech, he said that I asked him this. I honestly don't remember doing this, but this is kind of funny now in retrospect. He said that I asked him when I was a senior in high school, I said, Dad, you know what? I don't believe there are any opportunities for me. You had so many opportunities. Look at you, Dad. You had so many opportunities. There's not going to be any left for me. And my dad, I can just see him doing this too. He must have thought that was the dumbest, silly. He's probably like, oh my gosh, I raised this girl? So he actually, I'm sure just laughed and looked at me, which is usually what he did. And the bottom line is he, everywhere he looked, there was opportunity. So that was the dumbest question he'd ever heard in his life. And I believe he'd still say that today if he were here. I have been extremely blessed with opportunities in my life. But I really believe that if you put two people together and they are given opportunities, they will handle them completely differently. And when I look back at my life and all the opportunities I've had and how fortunate I've been and how lucky I've been, I try to think why. You know, why was I so lucky and fortunate? And there's a few things that come to mind. I always cared about education. I always thought it was good to get good grades. I always thought it was good to further my education. I didn't ever know why. It just seemed like a good thing to do. It just seemed like the right thing to do. Whenever I didn't know what else to do to better myself, I went to school. Preparation. You know, whenever an opportunity did come my way that I thought I could learn or grow, whatever it was, serving on a nonprofit board, you know, whatever, helping at my kids' school, whatever it was, it's like I took it on. I was never afraid to take it on. And little by little, all those things prepared me for something I didn't know I would ever even do. And I still wonder today, like, what's next, right? Everything I do. What was this experience with Flying J preparing me for? Because there's always been something else. And I think that you always have to be thinking about that. What are you preparing yourself for? Because you don't really know. You're preparing yourself for the next thing, an opportunity that comes your way. Confidence. You know, if you don't have confidence, nobody else will believe in you either. And if you don't believe you can do it, there's no way you can. So even as naive as I was taking on Flying J, I believed I could do it because I wanted so badly to pay everybody back and save our family name. It didn't matter. I didn't want to think about not being able to do it because I had to do it. I had to do it. And if I had questioned for 1 minute, because I had the crystal lens, I could have just my life would have stayed the same, honestly, as it was at that moment for the most part. I just wouldn't have had the same balance sheet because Flying J, I wasn't getting money from Flying J or working there, so I could have just gone back to Crystal Inn and Flying J would have gone away maybe, or whatever happened. But we needed to pay people back, and I had to have the confidence that I had to at least give it a shot. Optimism. Again, sort of the same thing. It's like, you know what? I believed we could do it. I believed every day we could do it. And That's again something. Did I make mistakes along the way? Yeah. Did I make mistakes that were big that I could have just said, you know what, I'm done. I can't recover from this mistake. I'm done. I probably did, but I got up every day. I said, I'm going to learn from those mistakes and I'm going to move on, because that's what we have to do every day of our life. And you can't blame other people for things that happen. You know, my kid was sick that day, so I didn't get to go to the job interview, whatever it is. Don't blame other people for what happens. You're responsible for yourself. Integrity. One thing, my father was big about integrity, and he taught me that one. When you say something, you better mean it, and you better live up to it, and you better be honest. And through this process with Flying J, I knew I was going to be talking to so many people, and that's really all I did, is meet with people, make decisions. If I would have, for once, thought, well, I'll tell this person this story, and I'll tell that person that, and I'll promise that person that, and that one that, I would have been dead in the water, because there's no way. Employees. I had an employee after an employee meeting one time where I delivered some bad news. I can't remember exactly what it was. Probably the pilot merger, because to most employees that was bad news. Come up to me and they said, you know what I wish? I really wish you wouldn't be so brutally honest. And I thought, you know, do you want me to sugarcoat what's happening? You know, I just believe integrity is a huge trait that we all need to have. So that's the end of my speech. And mostly I just leave you today. I hope that as you find your opportunities, you don't know where life's going to lead you, that you'll take them. Take them on with aggression. So, any questions?
Fortunately, we do have a few minutes, so let's open it up for some questions.
Go ahead.
You talked about the bottom feeders when you were seeking funding. And to me, I mean, you could have gone public, you could have issued bonds, you could have looked at private equity or something. Why did you decide not to go with any of those funding?
Really, at that point in time, in 2009, even those options, bottom feeders were kind of private equity. They were like really opportunity private equity. But bonds and going public, I mean, the IPO market, it wasn't really alive then at all. It was really a closed down point in our history, to do any financing of any kind or raise money. Ed?
Going forward, what do you see as being more important in terms of your time, Crystal Inn or FJ Management?
FJ Management. I mean, I think more and more, really right now, all of our businesses, including Crystal Inn, all have full management teams. So, like the refinery has a president, the bank has a president. We have a staff at even FJM. And so, really, I don't have to necessarily divide my time as long, it kind of depends on who needs or wants assistance in any of those companies. It's a whole different, what I do right now is a whole different ballgame than what I did in the middle of restructuring. Go ahead.
You talked about making the decision to stay home with your children and then obviously going into this took you out of it. How did you balance that and what effects did you see it having?
I think, and I sent my kids down. I don't think I said this. I said this in another meeting before I had the talk. But I sent my kids down on December 15th of that year, and I said, you know what? I'm going to be gone for 6 months. You probably won't even see me. Something bad's happened with our family business, and someday I hope you'll understand. I mean, I'm really still gone in a way, although the last year has been much better, and I'm much more balanced. But the 8-year-olds had, after I said 6 months. It wasn't 6 months. And I loved what I was doing. That's another thing. This was not a horrible experience. I mean, I tell the story, it might sound horrible. It was really fun. It was very intellectually challenging. It was like always trying to, for maybe 60 days, it was horrible. But other than that, it was intellectually stimulating. I want to do it. I wanted to do it. So an 8-year-old that's like, Mom, you used to pick me up from school, and now you never do. And, it's like, I have 3 daughters, obviously, and the 2 oldest did very well with it. The 2 youngest now that I'm kind of back in their life, I ask them all the time, I check in with them all the time, how do you feel now? How do you feel now? Because they criticized me a lot during that time. Why are you traveling again? Other moms don't do this. And they say all the time, "What's so funny of you?" It's like, I'll remind them on the weekend when they want to have a sleepover away. I'm like, I'm here on the weekend. I don't care, I want to go with my friends. So, I really think they don't show they do well in school, they're very involved, they're very social. I don't know, maybe they'll be in therapy sometime, but what I hope, is that my daughters and my son will look at what my husband and I have done. And honestly, how I did that too, the other real important part of that is I have a partner at home. And when I went into doing what I was doing at Flying J, he picked up some of the slack at home, which made a huge difference. And honestly now, he's very involved at FJ Management, and I've backed off some so that I can be with the kids. We kind of swap all the time.
Could you just say a word more about that? Because you said it to us at lunchtime about the importance of choosing your life partner well.
Well, I think from my standpoint, and I get chills, it's probably the only thing that would get emotional with me is that day in October, that weekend in October when I met my life mate. And, I had no idea. I'd only dated him a year. He's extremely intelligent. He'd gone to business school with me. But, he is such a complementary to me and my skills. And what we've been able to do together, wear different hats. He ran the business. I did the family. I do the family. He does the business. I mean, I don't know how. And what I said is, I don't know many men, and I'll challenge all of you, and you're a different generation than my generation, but I don't know many men, honestly, in my generation that could have had the confidence that my husband had to allow their wife to step out of being a mom and be gone and have to pick up the pieces for 4 kids and be not in the limelight. Your wife's in the limelight. She's the CEO. You're the guy that, and he had the confidence to support me, and I love him dearly for it. And, so I would encourage all of you, think about that when you're choosing who you're going to be with. Are they your lifetime partner? Do they complement the skills you have? Will they stand up for you, even if it means that they aren't in the limelight? And I challenge the guys, think about that when you get married. Think about your wife and how you can support her. And the same with the women. Think about that you as a woman might want to do more than you do right now at 20. And is that mate going to support you your whole life? Not just when you want to stay at home and have kids. Is that what you wanted me to say?
That's exactly what I wanted you to say.
My family, my kids are awesome. It's really fun to watch them grow up, and they're going to have a lot of opportunities, and I hope that they can be good citizens. And go ahead.
I just briefly want to talk a little bit about management and your management style. You talked about the father and how he was very into delegating. And so you have to.
I delegate everything.
Yeah, so I just want to find out, since this experience and going through the restructuring, have you noticed a management change in the approach to management, how that's gone, and what do you see in the future for that?
Are you asking the question of how it's different from when Phil was the CEO?
So when you basically
Right.
stepped in,
So my dad definitely was a much different leader than Phil, at least my impression. He did empower people. He let them do what they wanted to do. Phil was a lot more of a idea guy, and he would tell people ideas, and they thought it was really fun to execute on his ideas, and as long as they were doing that, he was happy, and so it was kind of fun to work there because he had all these great ideas that he executed on. But I definitely am very, very different, and I couldn't have done any of this without all the employees, and I think, that's the culture I want to have. It's very, very hard, though, when you have a company that's like 40 years old and has a culture that's been for the last 20 under sort of like a dictator. It's very interesting because no matter how long, I've been there 3 years, no matter what I do and how many times I try to be consistent in what I do and not be the way the other regime was, no matter how many times I do that, there's always sort of a dissenter like, I don't think that that's going to happen. But I'm trying, and I think it's working over time. But there's definitely, it's a huge cultural change. Do either of you guys want to comment on that?
It's a lot different. I've been there 19 years, and as you said, with the previous one, maybe I'll stand up and face you. With the previous regime, it was, he had great ideas, and he had very bright people, and I think that was a savior for Crystal, is because there were bright people already there, but you kind of did what he said you do, or you go the highway. And Crystal's more she's got great ideas, but she doesn't force them on you. She gets you in a meeting and cultivate them together, and then she has you run with them and report back. It's a return and report. So a lot different, and the culture is, it is kind of like, are you sure we can do that? Can we really take the tie off? It's a lot different. So.
Any other questions?
You took a little break there for 8 years, so when you came back, were you ever up against situations where you just found you weren't up to date with knowledge, what was going on in the industry?
You know, I just had to know restructure. And it was like I said on that slide, it was sell things and tell people the truth about what's going on. And, you know, it was basic sort of skills in restructure, really. So, no, I didn't. You know, I didn't know our retail business. I really did, to Clayton's point. I had to really rely that Andre, as CFO of our retail division, was going to, you know, the person running those divisions, that they were going to keep the status quo and keep plugging ahead. I mean, I'd meet with them and things, but they knew the business so much better than I did. And I didn't even try, honestly. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to rock that boat. That's taken care of. I'll make sure it's taken care of. We have enough cash. But so I didn't, you know, I felt inadequate. I mean, did I feel a little bit inadequate meeting with the CEO of Pilot to do a deal when he's been working for 35 years in this industry and he could talk margin and supply and this pipeline and that? Yeah, but he got it. He understood and he cut me some slack. But it's that confidence thing again where it's just like if I don't know it, I'll find somebody that does to be by my side, I guess. And I did that a lot. Go ahead.
From your story, I understand that a lot of the big role that had impact on you was the passion. You think you could have done the same thing with, let's say, a public company, or you think it's just main reason you did all this because of the passion?
You know, I think that's a very, very good question. Could I have done it for a public company? I think if I had been a CEO and I ran a company into bankruptcy and I was allowed to try to get it out and pay people back, I would have been just as passionate about it. If it was my responsibility, see, I viewed, since I was a stockholder, I viewed really it was my responsibility to try to keep as many jobs and to pay people back. And if I were in a leadership position in a public company, I would have the same passion and feeling if I were given the chance, you know. But, you know, if I came from nowhere, no, I don't think, you know, I would be like, well, why do I want to waste my time and go away from my kids to do this? I wouldn't have understood intellectually how fun it would be if it was out of the blue, something like that.
You said that you hired a PR group and that was a good decision. How did they help you?
Well, they were sort of a fire, there's a fire sort of PR company, and so they had like this textbook way that you would roll out an emergency, so to speak, and I mean, they'd done bankruptcies before, so they basically flew into Ogden and said, you got to have this meeting with this people, and you got to give them this, and you got to give them that, and they could just fill in the spaces on their worksheets. And if I would have just gone to our marketing people, internal marketing people who were devastated and said, you know what, we're going to have press releases, we're going to have, it wouldn't have happened. And I was thinking about that the other day. It's like, man, you know, how did that PR company, because I really think that was really, really good from a vendor perspective, from all across the board, just that one little decision to hire that PR company. And they were, honestly, they were of no use after about 3 months because we kind of got it, and you know, we kind of got the drill of sending out press releases and what was happening. But that initial moment when everybody was in shock, vendors, suppliers, employees, having them there to sort of say, okay, no, keep your message, keep on target. This is what you say to vendors that are calling saying you're not paying us. You know, and we had a very scripted way to handle December 22nd. And we told everybody how to do it.
Let me take the privilege of the last question. I'm going to turn to the audience. Crystal mentioned that we were lucky enough to get her as a student because we gave her a scholarship. How many of you are on partial scholarship here at Utah State University? Look at this. You know,
Awesome.
By the way, we all expect the same rate of return on your scholarship. You're getting on Crystal's. I mentioned to you that she's featured in our current Huntsman Alumni magazine. And we couldn't give her another Distinguished Executive Alumnus Award today, so we framed the article from the magazine, and it says, Crystal C. Maggelet, Dean's Convocation Speaker, November 2nd, 2011. Now, Crystal, we want you to know that we're not planning another 90-day surprise for you.
Thank you.
So we hope that your next year won't be quite as exciting as the year after you received the Distinguished Executive Alumnus Award, but we're very proud of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.